I hate bootlegs. You don't need no creativity or talent to make them. That's what some people in the sneaker community say, and as you can guess, if I'm making this video, it's because I literally think the opposite. And I would even say more. Those who think that bootleg is just replacing the swoosh and that any 6.5-year-old can do it, I think you're way off. We've seen it with all the lawsuits from Nike against bootleggers. Every time there's a part of the community that rejoices at the idea of one of these brands disappearing. The most recent one is the lawsuit against Kool Kai, and judging by the insane reactions of some people, it's like the guy burglarized your house or he's a giga pedophile. Come on, he just makes shoes. After talking to figures in the sneaker culture, or even with Ari Foreman, who is one of the pioneers of bootlegs, I noticed that generally, among people in the game, they're more in favor of bootleg. So apart from random comments under publications, I had a hard time finding anti-bootleg arguments. But there's still one guy who stands out in the anti-bootleg movement. It's the YouTuber Not Tripping. And well, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, but I think he's gonna be your lawyer here, since he's the only one I found to plead the case against bootlegs. He's the kind of lawyer that's so bad he could get you 23 years in jail for jaywalking.
Judge should be like, guilty. Peace.
Going to dissect his arguments. Spoiler alert, he's just chatting a whole lot of shit. But more importantly, we're going to trace and understand the history and cultural impact of bootlegs. Anyway, if you're the type who's convinced that bootlegging is bad, that it's not creative, or that it's necessarily cheap-ass quality, I dare you to stay until the end of this video, and you'll see that if you're honest, there's about a 97% chance that you'll change your mind about bootlegs.
Hi! How are you?
New video. We absolutely need to show more respect for bootleg, because in recent years, I admit that the image of bootleg has been a bit of a roller coaster, going from something incredible to pretty messed up. But to really understand what it's all about, as usual, we'll need to put it in historical context long before the hype. Bootlegging isn't an invention of Nigo with his Babesta, it's a term that dates back over 100 years to the Prohibition era when alcohol was illegal. At that point, when we talked about bootleg, we were mostly talking about illegally hidden and sold alcohol. Over time, the concept of bootleg as an unauthorized product would be used in almost every industry, from clothing to music, where unauthorized recordings of certain songs were sold. At one point, even when a DJ remixed a song without the artist's permission, it was called a bootleg. Today, with TikTok, this kind of unauthorized remix has become the norm, and often the bootleg is more popular than the original song.
That is blasphemous!
What interests us is apparel, and obviously, bootleg in that industry has quite a history. But at the beginning, it was quite shameful. They were ultra low quality products with very approximate imitations of logos that you found in flea markets. But like in music, bootleg in fashion ended up having a huge impact on culture, and it even inspired the biggest luxury brands. Think of Gucci, which released Gucci t-shirts with a Y and other designs inspired by bootlegs from the 80s and 90s, or a whole collaboration with artist Dapper Dan, drawing inspiration from the bootleg archives he created back then, but this time as authentic products. We can also think that Virgil Abloh was probably inspired by bootleg, especially this 80s bootleg of Jordan 1 for the era that we find on his off-white pairs. And they're not the only big names in bootlegs. We can also talk about Demneg Vasalio. One of his quirks is simply taking international brand logos and changing them into Balenciaga. He did it with MasterCard, or the one that you've surely seen, worn by your favorite influencer or rapper, the logo from Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. This kind of logo remix, I almost want to say it's his trademark. He does it with totally improbable stuff. He even took the ab workout routines you find on Facebook in 2012 and turned them into a $500 t-shirt. Dude's got some nerve.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man?
Of course, when you look at it from an external perspective, they're just fucking us over. But according to those who are into the Balenciaga vibe, they'll explain that it's primarily an artistic comment that denounces logomania and capitalism, with well-crafted and highly researched visuals to parody our consumer society. And that's the strength of bootleg. By using elements that already exist and that we all know, whether it's logos or silhouettes, you can more easily convey something through clothing. That's what Ari Foreman did very well with his Ari Menthol 10s, where he used the Air Force One silhouette from Nike and the Newport logo to criticize two brands that definitely deserve criticism. The creativity lies in how he connected these two worlds with highly relevant design elements, like using the Newport logo effectively to replace the Nike swoosh, or using dollar signs instead of stars on the sole. And thanks to the impulse of the Ari Menthol 10s and Nigo's Babesta, but also Alibaba, let's not pretend. In 2020, we saw what could have been the ultimate solution for sneaker fans looking for something different, more accessible, and possibly higher quality, while still sticking to the classic and iconic sneaker shapes you love. love the hype around bootlegs. Thousands of small brands or independent creators started taking the most popular models and adding their own touches, visions, or universes to try to create big hits. It's something we had already seen more than 20 years ago with Nigo's Bapesta or Ari Foreman's Ari Menthol, and it was now the turn of new creators to carry the torch. Anyway, that's what I seriously hoped for 2 years ago when I saw this bootleg movement emerging. But unlike 20 years ago, it had finally become accessible for almost everyone to create their own bootleg, and that was maybe the problem. This bootleg trend that initially got a lot of people hyped eventually went completely haywire, with products even more fraudulent than the worst pair of dunks that could come out of Nike factories. And the irony in all of this is that they were reselling for 2 to 4 times more.
Oh, damn!
You got it. Even though I'm personally a big fan of bootleg and we had some exceptions that combined design and quality, it's impossible to deny that the vast majority of bootlegs we've seen in recent years were unfortunately quite disappointing or downright fraudulent. A few years ago, when we talked about bootleg, we thought about Nigo, Kieran Preston, or Ari Foreman. Well, now we think of a Jordan 1 with a giant dildo stitched on the sides. It's clearly tarnished the image of the bootleg concept, which had a lot of potential but is now often seen as ultra low quality and not well executed. So much so that we even had a little troll from Imran Potato who released the Dunk Alibaba. And honestly, it's not surprising that most of them end up with such disastrous products. Starting a sneaker brand overnight and creating a real quality product is very complicated, even when it's about reinterpreting an existing silhouette, contrary to what most people think.
Light work, no reaction.
For those who still don't know, we are one of the biggest sneaker channels in France, and we've also launched our own bootlegs, so we really know what we're talking about. Our goal was to create 2 premium pairs made in Portugal that could summarize the evolution of the sneaker industry. From the very beginning in the 80s, when it was the real start of the game, without reselling or collabs every week, to today, where sneaker hype is at its peak, for better or worse. To tell the story of these 40 years of sneaker history, obviously, what better way than to use the Jordan 1 silhouette to illustrate that? The Heat draws inspiration from retro pairs of the 80s and the very first metallic pack. But it also aims to harken back to a time when sneakers were mainly seen as shoes worn by teenagers and kids, when the product was viewed more innocently, almost like a toy rather than a fashion accessory or even a financial tool. That's why you'll notice references to a well-known toy brand, packaging that resembles both a fire extinguisher box and a toy box, and for the term Heat. For those who don't know, Heat is a term used in the sneaker game to describe sneakers that are big hits, but it also simply means heat, which is why we played with flames, whether it's on the swoosh or in references to the famous toy brand you've probably recognized. But what's interesting about the term itself is that it describes warmth, something intangible that corresponds well to the feeling a pair of Jordan 1s or a new toy could give a kid in the 1980s. Now, the origami is the opposite, and we wanted to highlight the materialistic side of sneakers. It draws inspiration, as you probably guessed, from origami, where the basic principle is to transform paper into a creature or object. Here, we wanted to take that concept and reverse it, so to speak, to critique the resellers who transform sneakers into paper. You get it, by reselling the pairs for big stacks of cash. It's a design that will remind you much more of the hype models from the past 5 years without trying to be an approximate copy of something that already exists. Everything remains within a context that makes sense within the concept of origami, paper, or simply Japanese culture. With these 2 pairs, we've, at least I think, managed to provide a form of criticism, or at the very least, an observation of the evolution of the sneaker game. Anyway, when I see this as a sneaker enthusiast, I see designs that speak to me. Well, it's normal since I made them. I see a premium product of very good quality with historical and cultural references, but most importantly, a pair that you won't see on every street corner. I kind of feel like that's what all sneakerheads want, but apparently not, since I stumbled upon several videos about bootleg by Not Tripping, a guy who doesn't want to seem like a sneakerhead, but talks about sneakers non-stop for 4 years. His first anti-bootleg argument is there's no design, and he could have done it himself.
People are praising these designers for literally complete lack of design. Literally, I could have made all of these designs.
Well, for those who don't know him, 2 or 3 years ago, he released some very questionable hoodies with a yellow star, and what he did there was truly a lack of design. So to say that you're capable of doing anything in terms of design, allow us to doubt that. It's not for nothing that there's no trace of his brand on the internet anymore. Apparently it always ends badly for guys who stick yellow stars on clothes.
You need to leave!
When you've never really touched design, it's hard to understand the balance around a creation. Fugazi's pair isn't just a gun, it's very relevant arrangement choices. Whether it's the position of the gun on the side, the idea of bullet impacts on the toe box, or even the design of the sole that takes the lines of the original Jordan 1 sole and replaces them with elements related to the themes of his pair. Whether it's the sight, the horseshoe, or the castings, he took a silhouette that already existed and incorporated elements of the Wild West in a really well thought out way to maintain the balance and lines you find on a Jordan 1. And it's clear that now that Fugazi exists, you can redesign it yourself. But if it were Tripping who had designed the Fugazi, the result would probably have had a completely different vibe, and I can guarantee you it wouldn't have been pretty to see. His other equally faulty argument is that making bootleg is like cheating in school. Yikes.
It's like cheating off of a test in high school, but then writing your name on that person's test. Did you do any of the work, any of the studying, any of the hours dedicating your life to it?
Now we're in total schizophrenia. To attack bootleg, he's volunteering to defend a multinational, even though the guy spends his time promoting fakes. I think he's getting a little lost in what he's saying. I imagine he finds it unfair, this double standard in the sneaker community that rejects counterfeits but accepts bootlegs. But bro is just fucking lost it at this point.
For $450, you could get the real Nike version of these for resale on StockX. But no, some guy's trying to sell it off as this because it's Fugazi, it's bootleg, it's fine. It isn't fine.
Now he's thrown out a boomer level argument. Well bro, I don't know. Why do people prefer a Travis Scott X Fragment Jordan 1 Low to a regular Jordan 1 Low powder blue? In your opinion? Well, if you can understand that the Travis Scott Jordan 1 is not just any Jordan 1 thanks to its incredible backward swoosh, you can understand that the Fugazi, with all its details and the universe it managed to create, whether you like the concept or not, for some people it makes them dream a bit more than a regular Jordan 1, even if it's more expensive.
Duh. When did it get so bad? Who would buy this? Who the fuck would buy this? You can see how shit the quality is.
Of course, he's showing the worst products imaginable. We can do the same by talking about streetwear in general. There are independent brands that are terrible, others are more high quality, and it goes all the way up to luxury streetwear, like Off-White and Louis Vuitton. It's the same for bootlegs. There are ultra cheap pairs, some are really premium, and for those who got our Air Origami on the first drop, you know what I'm talking about when I say a truly premium pair.
These were made in Portugal. Material on this new buck is insane. They didn't cheap out on anything making these.
Replicas are made in China. Do you not realize that literally the bootlegs are made probably by the same exact manufacturers that are producing replicas? If you go on Alibaba, you can do custom Air Jordan 1 and literally just submit all your designs right to the manufacturer, and that's how these bootleggers get their custom products.
So yes, often fakes are made in China. The real ones are also made in China, and bootlegs too. The reason is probably that over 60% of the shoes made in the world come from China. Many bootlegs are made on Alibaba, or Abibaba, as he says. But it's not necessarily an absolute truth. Our bootlegs are made in a workshop in Portugal. Those from Lost Angel or Enterprise Japan are made in Italy. So if you're one of the people who are bothered by made in China, there are more premium bootlegs made in Europe. Anyway, for me, his grudge against bootlegs is quite absurd. Nobody will deny the creativity of a Virgil Abloh or a Salehi Bembury, yet they do more or less the same thing as those who make bootlegs, reinterpret iconic designs. It's just that Nike gave them the right to do it. When they have to create their own shapes, naturally it has less impact, and we've already explained why in a previous video. Nike did everything to make these models iconic and fully part of the culture. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. So I know you're brainwashed and it shocks you when it comes to your favorite Nike sneakers, but it doesn't seem to bother you for t-shirts. Why can everyone make the same t-shirts without volunteers coming to claim ownership of a brand? The same goes for the Perfecto. Why do we see Perfecto everywhere, but no one comes to explain that the Perfecto belongs to Schott? That they designed it first, and that no other brand should reinterpret this design. I've never seen anyone say that Eddie Slemen was a fraud in terms of design and creativity because he reinterpreted Schott's leather jacket. Why was Stan Smith literally imitated by absolutely every brand without anyone ever being shocked? If in the sneaker culture there's a mad distinction between fakes and bootlegs, it's because they ain't the same thing. Fakes aim to be a dead-on replica of a product. Bootlegs though, they take already known designs or branding as a canvas to showcase their creativity. Yeah, there are a few shady bootlegs just trying to catch the wave of the hype sneakers of the moment, but many go way deeper deeper than that. To truly get it, you need that finesse to understand what the artist was really trying to say. Can't just glance at the kicks and throw shade without the full story, just because, oh, it looked like Nike, so no work has been done here. I think you're able to see the work and creativity when a Jordan 1 goes from this to this. So for me, there is even more creativity when you get there, because unlike a real Jordan 1, the guy has to also change the swoosh, the Wings logo, and even some part of the shoes. So he definitely does even more than Nike in terms of customization. When an element becomes so culturally impactful, you have to accept that it becomes part of the culture and gets reappropriated. Bootleg. You probably consume it in your everyday life, whether it's your TikTok remixes or your AliExpress lightning cables to charge your iPhone. And if you're not okay with that just for your Nike sneakers, it says a lot about the grip Nike has on you. It's a bit like Tripping, who presents himself as quite distant from Nike, even though the guy literally spends his life buying fake Nike instead of going elsewhere. Clearly, we all benefit from this sharing of creativity, whether it's the young creator launching into sneakers, you as a consumer, if you can lean toward the right side of bootleg. And if you're too bitter to accept that young people are using Nike's iconic designs to start their own projects, well, stay salty, cause it's gonna continue.
Bro got black and white like MJ Caramel one, she bad. Better than who? You mad? 1-2 stroking that back, bouncing back. You hear that clap, clap. You hear that clap, clap. You hear that clap, clap. Haha. Yo, expensive taste, Bottega, no Bentayga. Bro serve that, no waiter, no Migos. The BS that way, don't cut trees on my paper chaser. Million